Pivot tables help you summarize large data sets efficiently, but it can be difficult to interpret data when all you have to go on are the raw numbers. Charts summarize data visually, making it easier to distinguish groupings and trends in your data. Just as you can create charts based on regular worksheet data sets, you can create dynamic charts, which are called pivot charts, from the data you use to create a pivot table. I'll demonstrate that process in this movie. My sample file is create 0601, and you can find it in the Chapter 6 folder of your exercise files collection. This workbook contains a single worksheet, and on it I have an Excel table with all ordered details. As with pivot tables, an Excel table is the best source for a pivot chart because any updates you make to your Excel table will be included the next time you refresh the pivot chart. Once you have your data set up, click any cell in the Excel table, and then on the Insert tab of the ribbon, in the Charts group, click the Pivot Chart button. Doing so displays the Create Pivot Chart dialog box. You can make sure that the table that's the source of your data is identified properly. In this case, it is. And I will put this pivot chart on a new worksheet. I'll leave that selected. Everything else looks good. I'll click OK. And I get my pivot table and pivot chart. So I will increase the zoom a bit. You'll notice that you get the pivot table and pivot chart created at the same time. The pivot table you just created provides the data and structure for the pivot chart. But if you look over to the right, you'll see that you have the pivot chart fields task pane, and that allows you to create the pivot chart from here. So let's go ahead and create one. I will drag a category to the axis or categories area. That will provide the values for the X or horizontal axis. And then I will drag total price to values, and you see that we get the sum of total price. And I'll drag the chart a little bit over to the right so it all appears in the worksheet. And as you can see, the values in the pivot chart are the same as the values in the pivot table. If you don't want to show the pivot table, you can drag the pivot chart over top of it, and it's hidden, although it is still active.